The first time I said the word divorce out loud, I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 2 in the morning. The house was asleep. Emeka was asleep. The children were asleep. Even the generator had finally gone quiet, which meant the power was back, which meant the ceiling fan was turning again, slow and uneven the way it always did, clicking on every third rotation like a clock that could not keep time. I stood in front of that mirror and I whispered it. Just the word. Just to hear what it sounded like coming out of my mouth. Divorce. It sounded foreign. It sounded English in the way that certain words sound English even when you say them in your own language. Clinical. Distant. Like something that happened to other people in other countries on television screens. It did not sound like a word that belonged in my bathroom, in my compound, in my life. It sounded like a grenade, and I had just pulled the pin. I did not say it again for another 8 months. If you are new here, my name is Amara, and this is Amara the African Girl. I grew up in a small village in West Africa, in a world where marriage was not a choice you made, but a life you were given. And the only thing more unthinkable than a bad marriage was no marriage at all. I left a few years ago, and this channel is where I say the things my community sealed shut with tradition and shame and the quiet, relentless pressure of 1,000 voices telling you to stay. If you want to hear what really happens behind the wrapper and the head tie, please subscribe to this channel, click the like button, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I read every single one. Now, I need to tell you something important before I go further. This is not a story about a monster. Emeka was not a monster. He did not beat me. He did not drink. He did not disappear for days and come home smelling of another woman's perfume. He was present. He was steady. He provided. He did the things a man was supposed to do, the things the community measured, the things that made the neighbors say, "You are blessed," and the elders nod with approval. From the outside, our marriage looked like a house with a fresh coat of paint, clean, solid, nothing to worry about. But I was living inside the walls, and inside the walls, the paint was peeling and the wood was soft, and there was a silence so thick it had become structural, holding everything up by sheer weight. I want to explain what I mean by that silence because it is the thing that no one talks about, not in my village, not in the churches, not even in the conversations women have with each other when the men are away and the truth is supposed to come out. There is a kind of marriage where nothing is technically wrong. Nobody hits anyone. Nobody cheats. Nobody yells. The bills are paid. The children are fed. The roof does not leak. And yet you wake up every morning and you feel it. A heaviness that has no name. A loneliness that has no cause you can point to. A slow disappearing of yourself that happens so gradually you do not notice until one day you look in the mirror and the woman looking back is someone you do not recognize. Not because she has changed, because she has been erased, one small surrender at a time, until the only thing left is function. Cook, clean, serve, smile, repeat. That was my marriage. That was 11 years of my life. The first person I told was not a friend. It was not a relative. It was not a pastor or a counselor or anyone who knew me. It was a woman at the market, a stranger. I do not even remember what I was buying. Tomatoes, I think, or maybe onions. Something ordinary. Something that had nothing to do with the extraordinary thing that was about to come out of my mouth. She was the seller. We were haggling. And somewhere between her price and my counteroffer, I said, I think I want to leave my husband. Just like that, to a stranger, over tomatoes. She stopped. She looked at me. She did not laugh. She did not gasp. She looked at me with the steady, unsurprised eyes of a woman who had either heard this before or felt it herself. And she said, very quietly, "How long?" I said, 3 years I have been thinking about it. She nodded. She put the tomatoes in my bag. She charged me less than she should have. And she said, "Be careful who you tell next." That was the most honest thing anyone said to me during the entire process. Be careful who you tell next. Because she knew. She knew what I was about to walk into. She knew the machinery that was about to activate. She knew that the moment those words left the safety of my own mouth and entered the world of family and community and church, they would stop being my words and become everyone else's problem. If this is resonating with you, if you know what it feels like to carry a decision inside you that the whole world has already decided for you, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. Every like tells me that this story needs to be heard. I am so grateful you are here. Let me tell you what happens when an African wife asks for a divorce. I am going to walk you through it step by step because the outside world thinks it is simple. The outside world thinks you say the word, you sign the papers, you divide the property, you move on. That is not what happens. What happens is a war, not a loud war, a quiet, suffocating, deeply organized war in which every single person you have ever known picks up a weapon, and the weapon is almost always the same: shame. Stage 1, you tell your husband. I told Emeka on a Sunday evening after church. The children were at his mother's house. We were alone, which was rare and deliberate. I had planned this moment for weeks, the way you plan a journey into territory you know is dangerous. Checking the weather, packing supplies, memorizing the route, knowing that none of your preparation will matter once you are actually there. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the table where we had eaten 1,000 meals in silence, the table where I had served his food first, always first, for 11 years. I said, "Emeka, I am not happy. I have not been happy for a long time. I think we need to talk about separating." He did not yell. I will give him that. He did not throw anything. He did not call me names. He looked at me with an expression that was not anger, but something worse: bewilderment. Pure, uncomprehending bewilderment, like I had spoken in a language he did not know existed, like the words I had just said did not have meaning in the world he lived in. He said, "Separating? What do you mean separating? From what? From who?" And I realized in that moment that he genuinely did not understand. Not because he was stupid, not because he did not care, but because in his framework, in the architecture of the life he had been built for, a wife leaving was not a category. It was not a possibility. It was like telling him the floor was about to become the ceiling. The structure did not allow for it. He said, "What have I done?" And that question, that specific, earnest, confused question, is the one that haunts me the most. Because he had not done anything. That was the entire problem. He had not done anything wrong, and he had not done anything right, and he had not done anything at all beyond exist in the space beside me, reliable and present and completely, devastatingly absent. He had followed the manual perfectly. Provide, protect, lead. He had done everything his father had done, and his father's father before that, and none of it, not one single thing on the list, included the instruction, ask her how she feels. Stage 2. The families find out. I do not know how it happened. I think Emeka told his brother, who told his mother, who told my mother-in-law, who told everyone. That is how information moves in a compound. Not through doors, but through walls. Not in sentences, but in whispers. Not as news, but as emergency. Within 3 days, every member of both families knew that Amara wanted a divorce, and the response was immediate and unanimous. My mother-in-law came to the house. She did not knock. She walked in the way she always walked in, as if the house belonged to her, which, in a sense, it did, because in our tradition, the house belonged to the family, and the family was hers. She sat down and she looked at me and she said, I heard you have been talking foolishness. Not asking, telling. She had already decided what my words were. Foolishness. Not pain, not truth, not a woman finding the courage to name what she felt. Foolishness. She said, do you know what your bride price was? Do you know what this family paid for you? You think you can just decide to leave like someone checking out of a hotel? She said, no woman in this family has ever asked for divorce. You will not be the first. My own mother called that evening. She was crying again. The same quiet tears from years ago when I told her I wanted school. But this time the tears were different. These tears were not grief. These tears were fear. She said, Amara, what are you doing? They will send you back with nothing. The children will stay with him. Everyone will know. How will I hold my head up at the market? How will your sisters find husbands if everyone knows their older sister could not keep hers? And there it was, the real architecture. It was never about me. It was never about my happiness or my pain or my slow disappearance inside a marriage that was technically fine and spiritually killing me. It was about the structure, the reputation, the family name, the bride price, the sisters who still needed to be married off, the mother who still needed to show her face in public. My wanting to leave was not a personal decision. It was a structural threat. And the structure responded the way structures always do when they feel threatened. It mobilized. It applied pressure from every direction. It sent emissaries. Stage 3, the pastor. They sent me to the pastor, not because they thought the pastor could help me, because they thought the pastor could fix me. There is a difference. Help means listening. Fix means putting back. They wanted me put back. The pastor was a man I had known my whole married life. He had baptized my children. He had preached at our wedding. He was a good man in the way that many men in my life have been good. Decent, well-meaning, and entirely incapable of seeing the world from inside a woman's experience. He sat me down in his office, a small room behind the church with a desk and a cross on the wall, and he said, Sister Amara, marriage is a covenant. It is not a contract you can cancel. God joined you and your husband together. What God has joined, let no man put asunder. I said, Pastor, I am not asking a man to put it asunder. I am asking you to help me. He did not hear me. He heard the words, but he did not hear me. He heard a woman who needed to be reminded of her vows. He heard a woman who had lost her way and needed to be guided back to the path. He opened his Bible. He read from Malachi. He read from Ephesians. He read about submission and endurance and the sanctity of the home. He prayed over me. He laid his hand on my forehead and prayed that God would remove the spirit of rebellion from my heart. The spirit of rebellion. As if wanting to be seen by your own husband was an act of war. As if loneliness was a demon that could be cast out if you just prayed hard enough. I sat there with his hand on my head and his words floating above me, and I thought, very clearly, for the first time with absolute certainty, no one in this room is going to save me. Not the pastor, not my mother, not Emeka, not his mother, not the elders, not the tradition, not the God they kept invoking, who I still believed in, but who I was beginning to suspect had been misquoted for a very long time. If I was going to be saved, I was going to have to save myself. Before I continue, if this story is reaching you, please subscribe and like this video. Turn on the notification bell. These stories exist because you show up to hear them. Every subscriber tells me to keep going. Stage 4, the negotiation. This is the part no one outside the culture understands. Divorce in my world was not a legal process. It was a financial and social negotiation conducted entirely by men about a woman who was not allowed to speak. My father and Emeka's father sat down with the elders. The question was not whether I was unhappy. The question was not whether the marriage was working. The question was what happened to the bride price, the money, the fabric, the palm wine, the goats, everything that had been exchanged when I was given, and I use that word deliberately, given, like a parcel, like property, like a thing with a receipt, to Emeka's family. If I left, the bride price had to be returned. My family had to pay back everything, and my family did not have it. The money had been spent years ago. The fabric had been worn. The goats had been eaten. Returning the bride price would have meant my father selling land, borrowing money, carrying a debt that would follow him into old age. The system had been designed this way. The bride price was not just a tradition. It was a lock. It was a financial mechanism that made leaving so expensive that most women could not afford to go, and most families could not afford to let them. I sat outside the room while they negotiated my life. I could hear voices through the wall, my father's quiet, heavy, ashamed. Emeka's father's louder, offended, righteous. The elders measured and calm, performing neutrality while everyone in the room knew the outcome had already been decided. A woman does not leave. That is the answer. That has always been the answer. The negotiation was not about whether I would leave. It was about how much pressure to apply until I agreed to stay. Stage 5, you stay, or you lose everything. They gave me a choice that was not a choice. Stay and the family remains intact. Leave and the bride price must be returned. The children stay with the father because they belong to his family. Your name becomes the cautionary tale every mother tells her daughter. You see what happens when a woman thinks she is bigger than her marriage? You see what happens when a woman forgets her place? Most women stay. I need you to hear that. Most women, when they reach this stage, when they have been prayed over and lectured and shamed and calculated against, when the cost of leaving has been made so clear and so total that freedom starts to look less like liberation and more like destruction, most women stay. They go back to the kitchen. They go back to the bedroom. They go back to the silence. And they carry the word divorce inside them like a stone they swallowed, heavy and permanent and never spoken again. I understand those women. I was almost one of them. What saved me, and I use that word carefully because it felt exactly like being saved, like being pulled from water, was a conversation with a woman I barely knew, a neighbor's sister who was visiting from the city. She had been divorced for 4 years. She was the first divorced woman I had ever spoken to who did not look broken. She looked ordinary. She looked like a woman who went to work and came home and cooked dinner and watched television and lived a life that was small and quiet and entirely her own. I said to her, "How did you survive it?" She said, "You don't survive it. You just decide that being whole matters more than being approved of. And then you keep deciding that every day for a very long time." I left. It cost everything they said it would cost. My father borrowed money to return part of the bride price. He did not look at me when I came to say goodbye. He sat in his chair, the chair that faced the gate, the chair no one else was allowed to sit in. And he looked at the ground and he said, "You have made your decision." That was all. No blessing this time, no instruction, just the acknowledgement that I had done something he could not undo and could not support and could not stop. I moved to the city with one bag and the feeling that I had just amputated a part of myself that had been dying for years, but had still been attached, still technically alive, still part of the body. The first 3 months, I did not know how to be a person outside of a compound. I did not know how to eat alone. I did not know how to sleep in a room where no one else was breathing. The freedom they had warned me about, the terrible, dangerous freedom, turned out to be real, but not in the way they meant it. It was not dangerous because it was sinful. It was dangerous because it was empty. And I had to learn, slowly, painfully, how to fill it with something that was mine. I got a job. I found a church that did not know my story. I made one friend, then 2. I learned to cook for one person, which is harder than it sounds when your hands have spent a decade measuring rice for 7. I learned that missing my children and surviving were not mutually exclusive. You could carry the ache and still move forward. You could cry at night and still get up in the morning. You could be broken in one place and whole in another, and both of those things could be true at the same time. It took 1.5 years before Emeka agreed to let the children visit. Not because he was cruel, because his mother had told him that letting them visit would be the same as admitting I had won. And in our world, a man does not let a woman win. But the children missed me. And children have a way of making their missing known that even the most stubborn elder cannot argue with. They came for a weekend, then a week, then slowly, like water finding its way through rock, a rhythm established itself. They were with him during the school term. They were with me during holidays. It was not enough. It was never enough. But it was something. And something, after 11 years of nothing, felt like a miracle. Years later, in my therapist's office, this small room with plants on the windowsill and a box of tissues she never pushed toward me, but always kept within reach. She asked me if I regretted it. I sat with the question the way I have learned to sit with difficult things, not rushing, not performing an answer, just letting it settle. I said what I always say when someone asks me that. I said, I regret that the system made it cost so much. I do not regret refusing to disappear. She said something that day that I have turned over many times since. She said, the system did not fail you. The system worked exactly as it was designed to. It was designed to make leaving so expensive that staying would always seem like the rational choice. The fact that you left anyway does not mean the system failed. It means you outgrew it. I outgrew it. Like a child outgrowing a shoe. The shoe was not evil. The shoe had served its purpose. But the foot kept growing, and the shoe did not. And at some point, the choice was between cutting the foot or taking the shoe off and walking barefoot until you found something that fit. If you have stayed with me this long, thank you. These stories are not meant to be easy. They are meant to be true. I do not tell this story to condemn African marriage. Marriage in my culture carries things inside it that are beautiful. The depth of family, the seriousness of commitment, the way a community wraps itself around a couple and says, we are in this with you. I carry those things with me still, but I tell this story because somewhere right now, tonight, there is a woman standing in front of a bathroom mirror at 2 a.m, whispering a word she is terrified of. And every person she knows has already decided that the word is wrong. The pastor has decided. The mother-in-law has decided. The elders have decided. The tradition has decided. And nobody, not one single person in the entire architecture of her life, has stopped to ask her the only question that actually matters. Are you okay? I was not okay. For 11 years, I was not okay. And the system was not designed to notice. It was designed to continue. If this story touched something in you, tell me in the comments. Tell me what part stayed. Tell me your story if you are ready. I read every single one. You are never as alone as the silence made you feel. Subscribe to Amara, the African Girl. There is still so much I have not said. Until next time, your voice belongs to you. It always did, even when they taught you to swallow it.